into your eyes. It comes as no surprise. You're slipping away. Angie, you're the love of my life. It's so cold at night. I'm begging you to stay. I know it's all a masquerade. I know you're not afraid. You're just what I've been looking for. No other boy can love you more. You're the only girl I adore. You're just what I've been looking for. Time will mend your broken heart. Just don't fall apart. The truth will hold inside. Angie, I don't wanna let you go. I don't wanna let them know the pain you have to hide. I know it's all a big charade. Whoa, I know you're not afraid. No, you're just what I've been looking for. No other boy can love you more. You're the only girl I adore. You're just what I've been looking for. Just what I'm looking for. Just what I've been looking for. No other boy will love you more. You're the only girl I adore. You're just what I've been looking for. You're just what I've been looking for. Just what I've been looking for. You're just what I've been looking for. You're just what I've been looking for. Just what I've been looking for.
What's up?
Howdy, sirs.
What's up, man?
How's it going?
How are you all doing?
Great.
Super.
It's funny how much the backdrops of all these look the same, basically, like horror posters and
Right.
Blu-rays. Yeah.
Brad, is that your collection?
Yeah, it
Jesus Christ.
goes over to that wall, swings back, goes to that wall. Yeah.
Jesus Christ.
It's pretty bad here.
That
Please
is
tell me-
gnarly.
Please tell me that's not all Blu-rays.
No, it's a mixture between VHS, DVDs, and Blu-rays.
Thank God for that. Like, I wouldn't even know what to do if there was that many.
Don May Jr. is a Blu-ray snob. He doesn't have a DVD on his shelf.
Yeah.
Hi guys, can you hear me okay?
What's up, Justin?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Yeah, dude.
Good.
So I think we have everybody in here. We appreciate you guys joining us tonight for sure. Kristian, definitely big thanks for setting this up for us. We don't have any of the hookups anymore. We've been out of the game for just a little bit, so we appreciate that.
Yeah, no problem.
So I guess we could just go around and you guys can maybe tell us what your background is and exactly what you do for people that may not know. A lot of people probably do, but there may be one or two here that don't.
No, I mean there's always new audiences and stuff like that. So,
Well, Brad, why don't you go first?
oh, this is live right now. Holy shit! There's no countdown. Okay.
Yeah, there's no.
Well, we kind of had a countdown, and we did have a countdown, but it froze up. So
Oh, okay.
From the mothership, 6:05.
I
Yeah.
sound like some dickhead looking down. Well, first off, thank you for having me on the show. Very
I
happy
thought you were
to be
just
here.
being like extremely casual. That's what I thought.
No. I appreciate you. You know, obviously having us on, and thank you, Kristian, for mentioning me. And I'm always happy to talk. So yeah, I mean, I work at Vinegar Syndrome and acquisitions and special features, putting together commentaries and whatever else, documentaries, stuff like that.
I'm Justin Beahm, and I do the same thing. I do special feature commentary, documentary production for a number of different companies, primarily Shock Factory, Scream Factory, and Paramount.
And I'm Kristian Day, and I have done work for both these gentlemen. I do a lot of editing, but I work in some of the mainstream world. I did 5 seasons on, and please don't hold this against me, I did 5 seasons on the Bachelor shows in production. I do regional and national. I know. Regional national commercials, and then my friends and I, every once in a while we get together, we make projects. I've produced for Crypt TV, and then I'm doing a couple indie features, one with Wavelength Productions this summer. They did that documentary on Mr. Rogers, the Won't You Be My Neighbor. But I love working with these guys because it keeps me in the horror genre to some degree, which is where I would love to be, but my career has taken me down these other paths. So working on these projects is really a labor of love. Even when they call me 48 hours to 24 hours before the project is due, both of you,
Me?
both of you. All right, Brad had the 24-hour mark. Justin had the 4-day.
There we go.
Line.
4 days is a lot better than 24 hours.
Yeah. As I'm editing in my car, I'm trying to go on vacation. Again, both of them.
it's multitasking, though.
Was it last, Justin, when was it when we were doing Friday the 13th and you called me and you needed some help with the Friday the 13th box set? And I'm like, well, I'm about to get in a car and drive to Montana. And you're like, no, it's fine. Do it real quick. It'll be easy.
I never said easy. I wouldn't say easy, but yeah.
I always say easy
Yeah,
because I'm not doing it.
right.
The editors are I mean, honestly, editors is what makes these things. Editing is very important, whether it's making a feature film or editing a interview. It's just that's one thing that I always allow, obviously, and I give my 2 cents, of course, but the creative freedom for editing is very important to me. Because obviously they know what they're doing. And I'm very fascinated with the editing process. So that's something that, working with, Justin and of course, Kristian and Rebecca Howard and, Elijah Drenner, various others. They just they do some stellar work.
So I'm curious about the one thing that all you guys have in common when you're not working on The Bachelor. Besides that, is that genre films. So like, how does that come to be? Like, how do you guys get into like genre film restoration, genre film, just all of that?
Are you talking about just like from a standpoint of getting into the business?
Actually, I'm talking maybe like more along both. Like, how did you get into them in terms of just kind of getting into them personally, and then how did you get into the business too? Yeah.
Well, I mean, I'll go real quick. My personal story is that I was raised on this stuff ever since I was 4, watching horror films and being fascinated with it. And then as I got older, I was watch as many horror films as I can. And then, my father would want to watch prison movies. My grandfather would watch Westerns. My grandmother liked erotic thrillers. My great-grandmother loved musicals. And so whoever I stayed with or whoever I hung out with was, not a fanatic, but would watch a lot of films. And so it kind of took me on a journey across multiple genres. And then I just got to a point where I wanted to consume everything I possibly could. So it's just not horror. I mean, it's everything. Just renting everything I could at a video store from top to bottom. And then the one thing that I really attribute to a lot of knowledge and research is before IMDb, there was this all movie guide, like DVD-ROM in the 90s, and I had one. And it was basically IMDb, but it allowed me to venture out and research a lot of different things and want new things. And then eBay was a huge gateway because all these stores were going out of business, is not going out of business, but getting rid of their tapes. So I was able to purchase box lots of horror tapes for like, $50, $75. You would get hundreds of them because no one was after them at the time. And then it just grew and grew and grew. And then going to school, it made me want to, kind of study film and research films and learn how they were made, learn about filmmaking in general. And that's pretty much it. I got into it, and then I wanted to start, rescuing films. I was obsessed with like lost films, and this was all before Vinegar Syndrome. And then getting into Vinegar Syndrome, just telling them what I did, what I studied, what I knew, my whole drive behind everything. They just thought I was a good fit, for the company. And then they brought me on board.
And Brad, your podcast too. I mean, you've been through that.
Yeah. I mean, we had the podcast. I mean, that was mainly just to, fart around because I do love talking about horror and joking about stuff. But, I love casual conversations about horror films, what we love about them. I mean, horror is definitely a centralized thing for me by far. But just movies in general. I just love to chat about it and, in a non-serious way. And that's kind of the podcast was an outlet for that. And Justin's been on a few times, and Justin was always proper and knows his shit and made us look like assholes. But
come on.
But the podcast was a fun thing, and just just telling people. The one thing that I love doing is we do have this kind of weird mentality in the industry where people shame each other for not seeing something, and I hate that, because the one thing I love is when people haven't seen something, you can recommend something to them, and then then you become like the person that they trust and go to for movie recommendations and listen to you and, are curious of what you're watching. And in a way you get to live vicariously through them, that they're watching the movie for the first time. And I envy that a little bit, I love watching movies over again and experience it in a different way, but watching a movie for the first time is very special. I'll never watch Halloween 2 again and have that feeling that I did watching it for the first time. I still love it, but I'll never have that back, but I can kind of see it watching it with, if someone hasn't seen it. But any movie in general, even watching them with my daughter, it's a wonderful experience. You're too busy kind of staring off to the side watching them to see their reactions. So yeah, no, just movies are just a beautiful thing in general.
I'm curious, in that vein, before IMDb and even like before eBay somewhat, did you guys have like a guy? I had a guy in the neighborhood that had like totes of VHS tapes, and they were all the stuff that you couldn't get anywhere else. Like I remember he had Zombie. Nobody, really around this area had heard about that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And he had all the European films and like totes, and he would sell them to you for, I think it was $10 at that time. But
there used to be a couple places. Now, one thing that Justin and I are both in Iowa, and in fact, I used to live where Justin lives, and there used to be a video store called Mr. Movies, and they had everything from Faces of Death to the most obscure trauma titles, and they used to get 7 movies for $7 for 7 days was their deal. Beautiful. But I also remember the first time I ever saw the Faces of Death tapes, it was like at a flea market gun show here in Iowa somewhere. And it was like a guy selling out of a cardboard box, and I didn't know what they were. And he was trying to explain to me what it was. I mean, I'm like 12 at this point. I'm like, oh, this guy gets eaten by a tiger or an alligator. And, my mom's with me, and she's like, get away from this. And it's years later, finally, by the time I saw them, I didn't have like a personal, like a friend that had seen all this stuff before. It's more of like the covers is what it was for me. And then, you get on message boards, early message boards, and, you see all the lies and rumors that would be out there. And then when eBay came along, I remember that's where I got like clamshell bootlegs of Cannibal Holocaust and the Japanese Ringu and all that stuff. When it first, 1998, 1999. And it was sort of a crapshoot. You didn't really know if it was going to be good or not, if you were going to like it, because there's no way to remember those days.
I had the video stores were huge here too, and Farmore was a big one. Farmore had this, I think, 5 days for $2, 5 tapes or something like that, which was great. And you could take them home in the box art. So you had the slip sleeve that you squeeze, and the tape comes out the bottom. And so you got to sit and watch the movie with the art present. So it was kind of like enjoying an artist while in a gallery, in a way.
Are you talking about those plastic hard cases that went over the slip and you had to squeeze?
Yeah, they had. Yeah, they're kind of like the ridges on the bottom. Yeah, but it was, for me, it was a guy. It was one of my best friend's brother was an avid collector of soundtracks, movies, tapes, novelizations, and he had a wildly diverse collection of stuff that we would dig through secretly because we were never supposed to be in there. But it'd be Saturday afternoon, and I'd go over to Al's, and we'd pull out like a tape and take it downstairs and watch it before his brother got home. We got to hurry up. But the monster thing, to your question earlier, it was, for me, much more innocent than a gun show and Faces of Death. It was a series of monster books that I've talked about before called the Crestwood House series. They're the orange cover books, and each one focuses on a different monster or horror movie character. And so long before I had even seen the movies, I knew their stories. I knew the characters. And then watching the movies, it felt like kind of like old friends in a way. And then Famous Monsters of Filmland was a big gateway for me as well. And then talking about having a guy, this kid, Matt Bortz, that I went to school with, his parents allowed him to have a subscription to Fangoria. And he would bring him into school, and it was like contraband. It was the secret. It was an absolute gateway for me into the deeper world of understanding movies, because it was just fluff for the most part in Famous Monsters, And then in Fangoria, you're learning about the makeup artists and the machinery behind the whole thing. And that's where I really fell in love with it, was when I discovered Fango. And then years later, the only magazines in the world that I wanted to write for were Famous Monsters and Fangoria. And I was fortunate enough to do both. And just a tremendous honor. And so it was very young for me that I started in with this.
Yeah, I think, with me, it was a lot of video stores where I lived in Florida. We had about 3 mom and pop places nearby, but the big one was in the Canton, Ohio area. When we would go for the summer, my parents were kind of both retired, so we would spend 2 months pretty much during the summertime after I got out of school in Canton. And they had a place there, 2 very close. One was in Massillon, one was in Canton, called Video Time. And their selection was just, insane. I would be safe to say they had like 20,000 tapes at the time just along the wall. They even had like a J.R. Bookwalter section because he was a local filmmaker. So any local filmmakers, all the Tempe entertainment stuff was there. But that was kind of a big thing for me. As far as a guy, when I was, I'm going to say I was 12 or 13, I was like on some message boards and forums, and I met this person who turned out to be Sly Stallone, Sylvester Stallone's son. And him and I became really good friends. And that was kind of my guy. He would send me some tapes. He had the craziest shit. I still have some, and there's no IMDb pages for him and shit like that. A lot of German stuff. And then when I was about 15 or 16, that's when Ant Timpson became known to me. And he was a notorious bootlegger for a lot of these films that were really hard to find. I think he got in, I believe he got in major trouble for it at one point. But yeah, he was very well known for, getting these films out there. And honestly, if it wasn't for, Sage and Ant, I don't know where I would be, because I wouldn't have been introduced to like Olaf Ettenbach at like 13 or 14 and all these, German gore films. It shed a whole new light, especially on European stuff, because at that time, going to the video stores, you would see, popular foreign films, but I didn't know that there were shot on video French movies. I didn't know that there was low budget German gore films. I had no idea. And that opened a whole new world to me for foreign films.
For me, what blew the doors off that was Michael Weldon and the Psychotronic books and Psychotronic magazine.
Yeah.
That was really the gateway to the larger world of cinema for me. And then around that same time, when I discovered that, is when Anchor Bay started bringing in all the Argento, the Fulci, and all that stuff, and those beautiful widescreen new transfer clamshell VHS releases with liner notes on the reverse, right on the back of the cover. That was really exciting. And the two paired together, those Psychotronic books, I have worn out. I will never part with them. If I have a Bible, it is Michael Weldon's Psychotronic. Both volumes of that, I think, are absolutely crucial if you want to try to expand your horizons into some new stuff. Wonderful.
There was one guy later on, after I kind of got into the genre stuff, and this is all going to come full circle. My buddy Ben Smasher, who later on became the singer for Satan's Almighty Penis.
I remember them.
Yeah, I've got one of their CDs for some reason. I'm sure it was probably.
I sent it to you guys 10 years ago with some Joel Wynkoop movies.
There you go.
You say Joel Wynkoop?
I did. I sent him a care package of Joel Wynkoop / Tim Ritter movies, that the stuff that Wynkoop would bootleg himself and put his introductions. And then I sent them Satan's Almighty Penis. Anyways, the singer for Satan's Almighty Penis, who's from Cedar Rapids, invited me to his house, and he started playing the Jodorowsky films for me for the first time. This is before they were officially released. These were like the Japanese bootleg box sets. And that included Santa Sangre actually in with all of the originals. And that really just expanded. I'd never seen anything like this before because it was so incoherent. And then the stories behind, connected the Beatles to him and Dennis Hopper and, Holy Mountain and all, first thing you see is, Jesus pissing himself and flies all over him. And you're just like, what am I watching? And that kind of, when you're 17, you're just like, I've never seen anything like this before. And that's when you're just like, there's something so far beyond what I know about cinema now. And, fast forward 5 years later, they were officially released. And now that the Blu-rays that came out maybe 1 or 2 years ago are amazing. absolutely amazing. They still affect me, and that's the type of thing I love to show, like house guests for the first time. You know, when they first come to my house to play a Jodorowsky film.
You definitely know who your friends are and if the relationship will continue.
Yes.
Yeah, because it's not even that they're that extreme; it's just bizarre, you know. So,
Well, I think that Anchor Bay, somehow or another, I knew that was going to work its way in there because for a lot of people, like that was our introduction, I know, to like a lot of the European stuff when it started to come out through Anchor Bay, and a lot of the double features they did, and just the regular stuff that they put out, and that seems to be a common thread amongst genre fans too.
yeah,
Anchor
my
Bay.
mother would take me to the Best Buy like every Tuesday because Best Buy had all those tapes, and you know I'll never forget like Living Dead at the Manchester Morgue. You know, Let Sleeping Corpses Lie, Dawn of the Dead, all those tapes in those clamshell things. I was so excited to get. It was like, you know, seeing those films on, even though it was VHS at that time, it was still really, the clarity was there aside from what I saw before. So it was like watching the films for the first time. And that's the beautiful thing, is that then they came out on DVD and it was like watching it for the first time. And now the Blu-rays are out, and it's like watching it for the first time. So each time there's like a new way, you know, a new format, it really is like watching the film for the first time again. And I think that's what's so special about restorations and these new formats.
Definitely, Anchor Bay Entertainment in the early days of DVD, I think they started making DVDs in like 97, I think, 97, 98, genre stuff. So a lot of these movies, when DVD was kind of in its infancy, like Dawn of the Dead came out like 98 or something like that. I didn't have a DVD player until like 2 or 3 years later. So some of the stuff that you guys are doing at Vinegar Syndrome, where Scanner Cop is coming out in 4K. Skipping DVD and Blu-ray. Fuck it.
I really tried to not. But
so
it's just an amazing thing.
I was thinking about it today. I mean, the two companies, you know, Vinegar Syndrome reminds me a whole lot of Anchor Bay Entertainment back in the early days, for sure.
Well, I mean, all of us that are at Vinegar Syndrome, and you know, I speak for myself in this sense for the most part, is that a lot of us have that background, so that's what our main focus is on, and trying to release these films that we love, you know, and that's a big part of, you know, Vinegar Syndrome is working with everyone, you know, discussing kind of what our favorite films are, and then going after them. I mean, essentially, that's what it is. In a way, you know, is releasing these films that we have grown up with, that we love, and we want people to see, and want people to see them properly. You know, with it, you know, because a lot of these films have been long out of print on VHS or never even made it to DVD. So, I mean, unless you're seeing a print in the theater, you know, a restored copy on Blu-ray or 4K is the next best thing.
It's the same thing, I think, with everyone. These companies like Shot Factory, if you look at Jeff Nelson and Cliff McMillan, the heart of Scream Factory, if you want to point to them directly, the passion that they have for these titles and bringing them in, I mean, that's what drives them. I remember when Terror in the Isles happened, and that's one of the most important films in the world to Jeff. And he was so excited. He did his first on-camera interview with Nancy Allen for that. And Jeff, you don't have to, when you're inside the company, you don't have to do that, but his passion is just there for it. And the same thing when The Fog rolled around, that's his favorite movie. And very similar teams behind all of this. None of this has to happen. It is happening because of the driven, passionate people who are working on them. And I mean, it's awesome that you guys are on here celebrating guys like us that do special features, because the reason we're so into it, the reason Brad will go so deep to find these people and to such lengths, is because these are the stories we were longing for as fans coming up. We remember what it was like to have bare bones pan and scan videotapes as the only resource to enjoy these things.
We're trying to find a fucking tape.
Trying to find a lot of them. I would drive
Like, it was
hours
a
out of
bitch.
town.
Yeah, I mean, I bring this up, and some people call me crazy, but I remember at a time when Return of the Living Dead and Monster Squad were two of the rarest tapes out there. Like, you could find complete trash before you could find something like that. And now it's at our fingertips on free streaming services, and it's rentable. But, I mean, when that came out on DVD from MGM, when that was announced, like, you know, I forget what year, obviously, probably like 99 or 2000. That was like a huge... I remember going to Best Buy, and they had like 50 copies like in the aisle just because, you know, it was kind of anticipated, which I thought was really cool because I was like, holy shit, there's other people like me that really want this, you know, movie. Because the only time I actually got to saw it is I think I taped, you know, it off television on Monster Vision. I think that's the... And then part two was the same way. I think it's the only way I got to see it. So yeah, no, I agree. I mean, it's you know, and you mentioned that we don't have to do things. I mean, yeah, I don't have to get on there and do moderate a commentary with, you know, Steve Barnett for Scanner Cop 2, but I had to because it's like one of my favorite sequels of all time. You know, it's like I'm going to put myself out there and do it, or, you know, doing something with Dennis Christopher for Fade to Black, moderating with him. I was a nervous wreck because it's Dennis Christopher, you know. Obviously, he can carry this himself, but, you know, at times, if you have the chance to do these things and, you know, kind of live a little and also bring something to the table because, you know, you feel like you're, you know, educated enough with the film or you know enough about the film to actually have a conversation, you know, that's you get to live that dream, you know, and then that's crazy to me. Because I always think back of, like, when I first saw this movie. Like, I saw this movie in my room at, like, 1 a.m. on a, like, Saturday night because I rented it from a mom-and-pop place. Shit. Somehow if I knew I was going to be, you know, helping, you know, bring this film back to life and, you know, being able to produce special features and talk with the cast and crew and get extra stories. And I can't even imagine what I would have thought. You know, it's very exciting.
I think one of the big differences between, like, other companies, some of the mainstream companies, and Vinegar Syndrome is a lot of stuff seems to be made for, like, consumers, meaning, like, they consume something and then they're done with it. And a lot of music is made like that, and a lot of movies are made like that. But then there's this whole other group of people that didn't really get a whole lot of attention that are, like, serious about certain genres of film, and they want to know everything that went on in those films. And for the longest time, and I think probably for us up until, like, Anchor Bay, nobody gave a shit about that group of people. Like, they weren't addressing, like, that market. And now it's like it's with Vinegar Syndrome and Shout Factory and Synapse and Blue Underground and a lot of other companies that I can't think of that are great. That gets its due, I think.
No, I appreciate that because it's one thing is that if the participation's there from the people, because you can't really force people to talk about these things. Some people are embarrassed that they did these films. Some people just want to forget about it. Others don't know that the love for these films. They don't know that there's this huge audience for it. So if the participation's there from the key players that made the movie that were there, then yeah, I'll always go above and beyond, you know, for features. I mean, we just did, you know, Surf 2, and we had 4 commentaries on Surf 2, along with like an 80-minute documentary and 2 different versions of the film. You know, and a booklet too, that like no one would really give a shit about Surf 2 if that came out on DVD in the 90s. It would just be dumped, or a major studio would have dumped it on DVD. They wouldn't have done that. And if the participation's there from all those people, you know, with the director and the cast and crew, like, that's a huge thing. And we'll go above and beyond if, you know, the stuff's there. I mean, with like the Beastmaster documentary, everybody that was alive, everybody that was alive that we contacted wanted to be a part of that. And we were able to make I don't forget how long it is, 80, 90-minute documentary with everybody aside from Rip Torn, who obviously has passed away. But everybody was super excited to talk about that. So yeah, it's, we get questions every once in a while. Is that why is this movie, only have like 2 interviews, and then Surf 2 has all this other stuff? And it's honestly, that's the answer, is participation. If the people are there and they want to talk about it, then yeah, we'll flat out go crazy.
You can't get everyone. You don't always have, but we're never not trying. That needs to be said for sure. And I think back to there's some really amazing pioneers that have worked in this field. Guys like Michael Felsher, who I consider to be the godfather of all of this, contemporary-wise. I mean, he wrote the book on these these fantastic features. Yeah.
He was slipcase before slipcase was cool. That's what I
man. For real. But I remember watching that stuff, and you're talking about depth, Brad, and bringing as many people in as you can from all sides. One of the things that even historically a lot of releases would have, if they had special features in the early days, you'd have maybe a couple lead actors, maybe the director, and that was about it. But we growing up reading this stuff, diving into the special features from guys like Michael and the other pioneers in the field, we want the in-depth stories from production designers. We want it from the composers, from the special effects teams. I love bringing animal trainers in. I remember when I pitched a commentary on Willard from the guys, the folks who train the rats, and Shout Factory's like, really? And it's like, no, hear me out. This is going to be it. And then it was one of the most amazing tracks that we've ever been able to put together. So it's finding unique angles to come at it from and bringing people into the fold who don't normally get to be a part of this stuff. That's the most exciting thing. And then, as Brad, you can attest as well, they're usually more likely to come on board because they don't really get this. Surf 2's crew isn't getting hit up every day for interviews,
Right, yeah, and it's exciting because even with the Beastmaster, we interviewed the animal wrangler Boone Nar, who had an incredible story to tell, and one of my favorite things is I actually got to do this interview because he lived nearby. Is Wayne Beecham for Fade to Black. He basically worked the smoke, he worked the squibs, and basically the gunshots and stuff like that. And I contacted him, and he said, "Well, I really don't have anything to tell because I did all this. This is the work that I did." But he starts talking, and he just talking and talking and talking, and I was like, "If you don't have anything to say, then why are you talking so much in that type of sense? Not being rude, of course." And I was like, "You have some very interesting stories. Let's." And the interview went on for very, very long time. It's obviously short and concise because it's pertaining mainly to Fade to Black. But something like him, he started out as a 17-year-old, 18-year-old guy who went in the Army who liked to blow stuff up. And they would go into enemy compounds and blow up their ammo and their supplies. That's what he did. And then he got into movies for blowing shit up because he got a call and said, "Hey, you know how to blow up a truck, right?" And he's like, "Yeah." He's like, "Well, you'd be good at it." And he's like, "Yeah, sure." So he went out. And then this guy, Wayne Beecham's credits are insane on IMDb. He's worked on major films. He blew up Morning House. That's the guy that blew up Morning House. And he did all this other crazy shit across all these films. And then he circled back, and now he's doing the pyrotechnic stuff in Army commercial and recruitment videos. And so it kind of circled around. This guy has this most amazing story, and you would never know that by a guy who did some squibs and a couple gunshots on Fade to Black, but he has this incredible career.
Left and right on King Kong. As I was having those conversations with people, it's amazing that film was King Kong 76 is the genesis of so many careers. And one of the most incredible duos that I've ever interviewed at the same time was Jeffrey Chernov and Scott Thaler, who were PAs. They were called something different then, but now the equivalent of a PA on set. They were young kids, never done anything in the movie business before, and they ended up as PAs on Kong doing all these various jobs around the lot to help out. And then they ended up being sent overseas by Dino De Laurentiis along with the dead Kong from the foot of the World Trade Center from the climax of that film. Well, Dino had sold it out to this French amusement park, and he needed somebody to take this thing over there and reassemble it, make it look usable, and then come back home. And so he found the two cheapest guys he could from the crew. And so he sent these two like 18-year-old punks over with their afros, pockets stuffed with weed, and they hop off the plane, and these people come to show up for these American special effects team. And here's these two stoner dudes who were just there to have fun. And they had to, fake the eyeball, improvise the hair, and get this thing all set up. But anyway, the point of all this is to say, Jeffrey Chernov and Scott Thaler went on to produce Mission Impossible films, Black Panther. It's a team that met on that set and went on to spend the rest of their lives creating art for the rest of us. And it was the most impossible, unlikely scenario when they first ran into each other. And there are some movies that are like that, which is remarkable, the stories you run into. And then it's so exciting to hear them, get them together to have that conversation at the same time. It's just so inspiring, so inspiring.
When I started working with Justin a couple of years ago, and we did, he put me on a small project, which was, I think, Fear No Evil. But the second project was The Blob for was it 1986, which was very, very intense for as many features that we had on that one, including, behind the scenes, like a featurette on the special effects team. It was a VHS of them working. But the interviews, especially with Chuck Russell and the director, and I remember texting Justin. I was actually down in New Mexico. I often do this stuff moonlighting when I'm on another project, and I should have been paying attention to the big job, but I was so into this Chuck Russell interview about how he drove from Chicago and got into the industry in LA, was a PA for Roger Corman. Roger Corman put him as a stunt driver. Like, you know how to drive a car real fast and you can slam on the brakes and not die? Yeah. Off he goes. But what I liked about him is he talked about he wasn't a boy wonder. He worked his way up from PA to production coordinator to production manager, working for different companies, and kind of did it the old-fashioned hard working way. Because you always hear these stories about a young guy going out there and somehow the stars align and they're in the game. But this guy worked his ass off in different roles, wrapped his brain around the entire production world before he was finally handed, a movie or two. And he said something very, very important. And I love to tell this, especially with like PAs who start working for me for the first time, who are kind of bitter that they're still PAs for like a year or 2 years. And I said, whatever the job is that you do, and this is a Chuck Russell quote, do your job well, just do it well. Everything else will come from that. You can want and strive for other things, but whatever job you say yes to, just knock it out of the fucking park. And I don't know why that hit me so strongly, because at this point I'm already, I'm on the road producing other stuff. I was producing like a thing for ESPN, and I really didn't want to be there. But hearing him say that was like extremely like, all right, he's right. I should not. I'm literally letting this show go to shit because I don't want to do it. And I'd rather be here listening to Chuck Russell talk to me about, his career making The Blob. But it was one of hearing him and all these guys who have been through the trials and the errors, the sweat to get where they are is really fascinating. And I'm not sure if people can really appreciate when they listen to these things, what these guys did to get where they're at. None of it's easy. Even when I started, I remember just like, I think about all the other careers I could be doing, even though I'm doing what I love and I'm on set sometimes, but I'm having like a bad day. But that motivation to like, all right, dude, just keep going. And whatever it is that you've been handed, just fucking kill it. And all these guys have similar stories like that. And I love hearing them. And the fact that half these stories are like, we're hearing them for the first time. is unbelievable. You know, I mean, think about what we had. I remember when DVD started, we were like, oh man, there's this one interview on this disc. This is sick. Now we can have 10, you know, and there's so much stuff out there. And like, you know, and these guys aren't getting any younger, you know. We're very lucky to capture some of this stuff.
Yeah, a lot of this, like you were saying. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, go ahead. No, I'm sorry.
I was just going to say, like, a lot of this that is getting captured finally, I mean, it pretty close to never have been captured because, like you were saying, a lot of these guys are kind of older and you know, I mean, you look at something like Return of the Living Dead. I mean, two of the biggest actors in that film were probably in their, 60s at the time that they made it, and, like, just recently, you know, having some sort of, you know, special features that would capture those kind of interviews. And there's 1,000 films like that, I'm sure, where it's like time's kind of running out to do something like that.
Well, and plus, like, if this stuff is re-released, you know, down the road, I mean, one, these people will probably be gone. And two, like, are they going to want to do it again? You know, when we already have this, you know, because the idea of doing some of this stuff is kind of creating this definitive edition, you know, because I you know, when Laserdisc first came out, you know, my mom and dad were always very much on board with whatever the latest, like, Fascination stuff was. So, you know, we had the Beta, you know, player, we had VHS. And then when Laserdisc came out, we also had CEDs, if anybody remembers what those are. But we had a Laserdisc, and I'll never forget. Oh my God, I'll never forget my mom buying Escape from New York, and I learned at that point that there's a commentary on it from Carpenter and Russell, and I was just like, I don't know what what do I do? Like, I just sit there and listen to it, and I did, and that still is one of my favorite commentaries of all time, just because they're smoking cigarettes and they're just shooting the shit, and it's like that is, like, you know, that is the best commentary to me. So I always tell people, like, if people have listened to it, I'm like, well, let's try to recreate. Like, this isn't like a business. This is your life. This is your livelihood. You live this movie for like 6-9 months, you know, and then you went on to do something else. And sometimes these people are out of the film industry. You know, they completely leave it behind and they haven't thought about this movie in 20 years. And it's not, and like, we sit down, it's not like a business. We're here to have fun. You know, we're here to talk about, you know, these moments. And yeah, if you're able to capture that, and you really capture a lot of great moments when you have people that worked under Corman or Romero. You always have wonderful stories from the Cormanites because, you know, just the evolution of filmmaking in that realm is insanely wonderful. And also just like Steve Barnett for Scanner Cop 2 again. He worked with Corman in the early years of his career. Not Corman's career, but, you know, Barnett's career. And having him speak about Scanner Cop 2 and speak about filmmaking, he really has this, like, handle on how to make a movie cheap and fast. But they did it well. You know, they're not shit. They're actually really well constructed, and it's learning under him. Anybody that worked with Romero, we did the interview with Dusty Nelson on Necromancer, and Dusty worked with George in the commercial days, you know, at Leighton Image and stuff like that growing up. And he said, you know, you didn't have to be like really great at your job. You just had to do it and want to work. And George would take you under his wing and he would show you how to do things. And a lot of times George was learning when he was teaching you. And those stories are wonderful too. So yeah, it's just, we only have a limited amount of time to get these stories out there. And that's the other important part, is that there's just stuff that isn't documented. And I noticed that when I was younger, writing to directors, writing to writers, and stuff like that. I mean, I'll never forget like writing to Mark Ezra. You know, I forget how it happened, but Mark Ezra is one of the three writers for Slaughter High, and Mark Ezra is such a fun person to speak to and just a very nice human being. But he started telling me all these crazy stories that happened on set, the sequel that they had completely written, and then, you know, obviously, you know, wasn't done because, you know, Simon Scudamore sadly, you know, committed suicide shortly after the movie was finished. But he just has like all these stories just to tell, and those stories just are documented. You know, he told some stories on the interviews for I believe he was interviewed for the disc that Vestron put out. But you know, these people are old, man. We have to document because they're not written down anywhere. They're not in books. They're not in interviews. You know, so it's honestly like this personal journey for me is to get as many people as we can that have interesting stories to tell, to edit it together into this documentary, or, you know, whether it's 30 minutes or 50 minutes or an hour and a half. You know, if there's an interesting stories to be told, then I want to hear them, and I want people to hear them, you know, because I get so tired of hearing this stuff myself. And then I have this like plethora of information that I know about all these people, but I can't do anything with it. You know, or I'm going to write single page like interviews or discussions I had with filmmakers 20 years ago. You know, I'm able to connect with these people and tell them, hey, what about this story? It's an amazing thing. And, you know, I know Justin and, you know, a lot of people that work in this industry that love these filmmakers and love these stories, they want them to be told. This isn't just a cash grab to release a disc and dump it. You know,
No,
there's a lot of work and a lot of, you know, love. What is that?
Especially not from our end in terms of the cash grab concept. I mean, nobody's getting in this side of the business to get rich, I'll tell you that. But to speak to time, and all roads leading to Corman, when I was doing the Piranha Steelbook that came out last year from Shout Factory, I had set up a commentary with Dick Miller and Roger, and it was going to be the two of them. They've never been on anything like that together, but their history is it's so interwoven, and it was going to be something really special that they were both really excited about. And unfortunately, Dick passed away right before the session, and it was really challenging. I picked him up from his office, and we spent the day together, and I transitioned the track. I had to overnight, basically, into a different discussion. But I remember going to the studio speaking to the studio when I just decided to continue with this with Rogers. After he and I spoke, he said, yeah, I still want to do it. And we were both pretty upset because we were both close to Dick. And I asked the studio to leave the table, the microphone, and the chair for Dick in the room, as though he was going to be there. And that way Roger and I could still have the same kind of presence that we were going to have with Dick in the room. And I turned the track into two things. And this is kind of speaking to having to do stuff on the fly. It became on one hand a tribute to Dick Miller and all that he had done. And from the earliest days of Roger's work, Dick was there. And then throughout his career, and then Dick Miller is an absolute legend, one of the all-time greats. And then also it was a career discussion with Roger. We had an hour and a half to kill. And so I just made notes on his whole career, and we had this beautiful conversation over the running time of the film. Lainey, Dick's widow, showed up at the session. Right as we were getting set up in the beginning, I look in the doorway at the studio, and there's Lainey standing there holding the hand of her granddaughter. And she's like, Dick would have wanted me to be here. This stuff is so much bigger and deeper than people can realize. When it's so important to capture these voices. It's so crucial that these stories are preserved, and it's not about the salacious stories on set, who slept with who and stuff like that. That's never, for me, been of any interest. It's about preservation, and it's about giving proper respect to the people who create these things, because yes, we spend our lives with them. They've spent even more of their lives with these projects, and sometimes they can lose their connection with them. And that's one of the most special things, is when you have them in the room and you're in an in-depth conversation with someone, you see them engaging with their heart and you see them change on camera. You can speak to this Kristian watching some of the pieces that you would edit, and you see, it doesn't matter their age, when they're in the chair, and by the time it's done, they're almost like a different person sometimes, because they have the chance to really step back into their skin from that time, or maybe celebrate something that's never gotten the chance, that they've never had the opportunity to discuss and dig in on. And that's such a special thing. So there's so much more at hand here than just telling stories of who called action and then when the special effect thing didn't work. It's infinitely deeper than that, and so much more there. That's where the joy for me lies.
Yeah, I mean, we had a similar thing. It's actually a really wonderful story, Justin. I got a little emotional during that for sure. I mean, because we have Justin's right. You know, I had one incident. It wasn't really an incident, but when we were doing Surf 2, everything was lining up for Surf 2. You know, we found this long lost director's cut that we didn't even know existed before we actually spoke to Randall. We're doing this, you know, documentary and stuff like that. But the big thing missing from this was Eddie Diesen. Because Eddie's open about this. This isn't, you know, any private information. Eddie had a really serious heart issue like a year and a half ago, running through the airport trying to catch a flight. And he basically collapsed and he was hospitalized. He almost died. And he wasn't actually supposed to be alive. He was actually supposed, like, that's what the doctor said. Like, he shouldn't be alive right now. And so he was hospitalized for a long time. And luckily, you know, the production of this disc kind of got pushed back a little bit. But the whole idea was like, how do I, you know, Eddie's in the hospital. He's alive. But how do I go about this? You know, is it insincere to say, hey, I know you're in the hospital bed, but do you want to do this Blu-ray? You know, like, how do you go about that? So I actually held off for a long time, and I was just like, this movie and this disc can't be complete without Eddie. Like, Eddie is kind of this core, like, you know, story. Like, everybody, when you talk to anybody from the movie, they talk about Eddie every time. Like Linda, Randall, Peter Isaacson, Fern Champion, like, they all kept talking about Eddie. And I'm like, how am I supposed to do this without Eddie Diesen? So, you know, it was one of those things where, you know, I just didn't know how to approach it. And I didn't ask because I just felt that was inappropriate, you know? And I spoke to Peter Isaacson and he said, have you talked to Eddie? And I said, no. I was like, you know, he's in the hospital. And he's like, yeah, he's doing really bad. So, like, 2 or 3 weeks later, I get a call from Peter Isaacson and he's like, hey, he's like, I just got off the phone with Eddie's brother and he's doing better and they're going to release him. And I said, okay. I was like, he's still, like, recovering though. Like, so he, like, gives me the number to Eddie's brother and I talked to Eddie's brother. I'm like, hey, I know this sounds so crazy and this might be inappropriate, but, you know, we're making this whole thing on Surf 2. I would like to get a commentary from Eddie. I would like to get him for an interview. I'll just settle for the interview, you know, if that's all the energy he has. And obviously this is during, you know, COVID too. And, you know, I don't want to risk anybody's life if they're already at risk, you know. And he was like, Eddie will want to do this. He's like, hands down, he'll want to do this absolutely, 100%. And so, you know, Eddie was out of the hospital for a few days, and he did a full-length commentary on the director's cut of the film, and he also did his interview, which and you wouldn't know that Eddie just got out of the hospital because he's still, like, you know, Daffy Duck on crack, just like blah 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 like this, and it just a wonderful interview, a wonderful commentary. And it feels like Eddie. It doesn't feel like a sick Eddie. It doesn't feel, you know, anything but the Eddie Diesen that we know and love. But yeah, it was one of those things that, you know, we still have production. We still have to do this. You know, we have contractual obligations, you know, to get this film out a certain time, you know, and much like you, Justin, it sucks when things can't happen. because this might be the only time or the last time. And that was a really, really great, moment is actually, having Eddie part of that.
I have a question for you guys. We talk about the films we talk about are older films that are getting re-released and getting restored, and they look beautiful, and we're capturing all these stories. The modern films that are being, packaged up with tons of special features, do you almost feel like we need to almost wait a minute and let some of these newer films kind of live a life without all that inside knowledge, so it can kind of settle, and then maybe we revisit it 10 years down the road? Because I feel like we value more of these old stories that we think might be lost, but we never really talk about modern films that are coming out now on Blu-ray, especially with all this talk about physical media potentially dissolving, which I know that's a dirty thing to talk about. But do you almost feel like maybe we should wait for some of this new stuff? I know, Justin, and you put together a beautiful package for Haunt. Beautiful package for that. I mean, it's one of my favorite discs. But there's other films out there. I wonder if we should let them go live a life first, and let the rumors and let the mystique build over a decade or two, and then maybe we come back and revisit them again. So I feel like a lot of folks are just trying to rush it out, because like the people know we love special features, but I'm not sure if we 100% value them as much as we do for some of the older genre films. Do you guys have any thoughts on those?
I think that when we started the show back in the day, there were all these little companies that were doing these independent movies that are kind of forgotten about at this point, like Illumination Film Works, Subversive Cinema. I don't know. There were tons of little companies like that. I almost think you could do special editions for some of those movies now, and they could be rediscovered. Like Baby Blues was one that came out back in the day. I can't remember the studio that did that, but I always thought that was a very underrated movie from, I think, around 2008, 2009. But yeah, I mean, I think a lot of the movies now, there's so much coming out, it's inevitable that a lot of them are going to get lost in the shuffle. I
remember Zombie Honeymoon or Blood Trails. That was a DV movie that was shot sort of like on a dirt bike trail. And I still have an old DVD of it. I think when a Hollywood Video closed, I have not seen that ever get re-released. And it may have been an Anchor Bay, but like a newer Anchor Bay film, a modern Anchor Bay film. But Zombie Honeymoon, which was part of the behind the scenes, was shot. Part of that was shot for that. Remember Horror Business, the documentary that Garitano did. Yeah. Some of those have not been touched. And maybe now is kind of like the time for some of those things. And although we absolutely cherish, now we're cherishing the 90s, which whoever thought we'd ever cherish the 90s like we do now. We used to just talk about the 80s, and now the 90s is like
everyone
the new
loves
80s.
Blockbuster Video now for some reason. I have no idea why.
Oh, I know. I know everyone's getting.
Well, I mean, to answer your question,
we never had Blockbuster Video, so.
Yeah, it was like Blockbuster was like last on my list growing up. But to answer your question, I think yes on both accounts, because I think it's interesting if you have a movie that is new, that is from 2020, and you do it full of special features and a commentary and like a mini documentary. I think that's great for that time period. But I think it's cooler in 25 years when that film gets rediscovered, or 30 years, when the people do new interviews and new commentaries, because so much changes from your perspective as a filmmaker and an actor and a producer and whatnot. When you make a movie, you feel completely. Sometimes you feel completely different about the film, back then. And that's the fun thing a lot with what we're doing now, is that when these people were making these films, they were very sincere about it. They were very serious. No one was making a joke. No one was trying to be funny. And now they're being interviewed, and I'm sure Justin can attest to this, is that when you call some of these people and you're like, hey, we're re-releasing, Scanner Cop 2, and then Steve Barnett goes, well, why? Why would you do that? He's the director of the film, but he just looks at it like, oh, that was just a silly thing I did. But I guarantee you when he made it and they had a screening for it, he was probably thought he was on top of the world and king shit. He was. But, now he's looking at it like it's a big dumb joke. And working with him and doing this doc and telling him what we have plans for it and stuff like that, then he's like, holy shit. He's like, this is fun. He's like, he is proud of his work. So I think it's good as a reflection to have some of this stuff, documented at that time. And then going back, 20 years later, 25 years later and saying, oh, I said this, but this is kind of what I think now, or this film stood the test of time, or it didn't, there's so many different scenarios. But I understand what you're saying. But I like to have both, because we actually have that sometimes with DVDs. We are able to port over an old commentary or an old interview, and the filmmaker sometimes completely changes their perspective on the film, or they feel differently about it now. They were proud of it at the time, but now they're ashamed of it. And it's good to capture that authenticity of what a filmmaker thinks. So.
I've got a question for Justin and Kristian. So you work for Vinegar Syndrome, Scream Factory. I know Justin works for Paramount as well. Are the approaches for the companies, when you're going into projects, do you know what each company wants a little bit different, or is one company more nitpicky about certain things, or how does that work?
Yeah, it's definitely a different process for everyone. In fact, for all the companies, it's different. I mean, with a studio, for example, there's going to be a different kind of process for the approval of things. There's pitches involved where you have to justify what you want to do with it. And then it has to run up the pole through marketing and legal, and there's a lot more people involved in the process there. Whereas with someone like Shout Factory, it's much more open in terms of the field and what they want to bring in. They really are, because they're such fans, and I really believe that the core of what makes their releases so special is the fact that they're fans on the inside too. Not that everyone in studios isn't. I'm not saying that at all. But I mean, it's different when you're with a smaller label like a Shout Factory, not compared to a studio. But whereas with Shout Factory, it's more like, who did you get? It's not, all right, tell us who you want and justify why, because they already know the why. And that's part of what makes that process work. And also the process is different for assembly as well. Some companies like to have all-encompassing documentaries where I'll shoot 10 interviews and I'll build them into one piece, like with Sleepaway Camp, or these are Shout titles, Sleepaway Camp or Silent Night, Deadly Night 1 and 2. Those were both all-encompassing documentaries. Whereas now they like a lot of standalone things because you can get a little more time with each person. You can fill the back of the box, make it, it looks nice in terms of listing it all out, but also it gives each person more of the spotlight. So in a way, you offer the opportunity to capture more of their story. So, and then the approval process once it's finished is a little bit different as well, as you can imagine with the studio. It has to go back through quality, legal, marketing has to take a look at it. Like there's more steps in that process. With Shout Factory, it's a little simpler to get through to the finish line on it. Hopefully that answers the question.
So when I do stuff with Justin for Shout, I mean, we do a lot of back and forth on a lot of these, and things have shifted over the years where sometimes we would have longer form content, and then, now it's shorter, but, have the best bits in there. When I've shot interviews for Warner Brothers Classics, for the Curse of Frankenstein, and then for Brad, a project that so everything I do, I have Brad and Justin who I will go through on all my questions on things, and if, like, for example, Brad will give me a list of questions of points I need to hit. But what I love about doing the interviews is when I get into it, we go down these whole other paths that are, something that we could easily do this in, a half hour. Next thing I know, I'm there for 2 hours with somebody going so deep on, because now I'm invested on this topic. The one I'm not talking about yet. I mean, we went so far in, and I wasn't sure if we were going to get anything out of him besides the basic questions. And I was like, oh no, this guy we can definitely go a lot further with this. And we were there 2 hours, knowledge that I don't need to have about this subject, but we're fascinating. Mm-hmm. Curse of Frankenstein's Blu-ray's out. Dick Clemenson was my subject for that. He published this magazine called Little Shop of Horrors. Wes, I sent you that information about him I think yesterday. A guy who's been publishing this magazine in his basement in Des Moines for like 50 years. And like Tim Burton's a subscriber. Joe Dante's a subscriber. It's nuts. Each issue's a thesis on a Hammer film or some British horror film. He's a guy that you might get 2 words in an interview, just like, and he'll be the same thing. He'll be like, I don't know how much I can really talk about. And then I'll ask one question, and I'm watching the time as this guy is just rolling. You hit the right note with some of these old guys. But the hard part with that is you also got to realize the attention span of a listener too. Although we love it and we're in the room, embracing all of this information, all these stories that are being told to you. And that this great 2-hour interview that you just captured is going to get cut down to 12 minutes. And that's a little heartbreaking. Because there's so much.
Early on, Kristian, you'll recall, like on Big Trouble in Little China, I was so excited to have a lot of these guys who had never been interviewed before for anything like this, that I was just obsessed with capturing their whole lives. I was just enthralled sitting across from Peter Kwong or whoever it might be. I have them in the chair. I don't want to lose this opportunity. And so I went super long form, and then I wanted super long form on those pieces. And so we just let them go. And so some of these things that was far and away the most, some would even say maybe bloated release. But I thought it was so important to capture these guys because this moment won't happen again. And like you said, they won't be around forever. Now, since I started doing my own editing, I've really, it's just like I love about writing back in the day. I love the process of streamlining. I like finding the rhythm in something. I'm a drummer, so that kind of is bred into me. And then being able to get a piece from A to Z in a more streamlined fashion that is more palatable for people who don't have an hour to sit and listen to karate classes when this guy was 6 years old or something like that. So I actually enjoy the streamlining process now more than ever. And I also have these interviews in the pocket too. So who knows, maybe at some point there might be a print version that's expanded of the interview or something like that. You just never know where that could grow elsewhere. But for these releases, I've really grown to appreciate and embrace a shorter form approach, and finding just the sweetest bits to put in there is a lot of fun now, where historically I would have just been overjoyed and put the whole thing on there from front to back.
And Big Trouble was a huge project. I mean, how many pieces did we do for that?
I think it was like 15 it was like 15 total. It went to a second disc because of that.
Right.
So, but it's because in that case, I had no breaks. I had no breaks on that one just because I didn't want to. I so love that movie, and I didn't think it was that. I'm never going to get the chance to work on Big Trouble again. So I'm calling everybody. I did a piece on the Coupe de Villes, the band that did the Big Trouble, that song and that music video, because it's such a little oddity and such a bizarre fragment that a lot of people don't know that Michael Myers was in a band with John Carpenter and the director of Halloween. I mean, it's like, you don't know Tommy Lee Wallace, Nick Castle, and John Carpenter were in a band, but then you get Tommy Lee in the room and you start talking with him, and Tommy Lee goes, John and I met when we were kids and our bond was over music. Then it starts to make sense, right? Then you start to realize how these things grew and these friendships that these guys have had. Again, back to the point with like Chernov and Thaler. They began at this little sort of pupa stage, and look what they've grown into. Complete iconic status. You would think that it would be well known that the Coupe de Villes was a band featuring all three of them, but you didn't. Anyway, when you can get that kind of story, you run with it. And that's why that one was so packed. And the Blob was similar. Another movie I've loved.
There's a record. There's a record out. They need to do a limited release of that, re-release it.
Yeah, waiting out the 80s. Alan Howarth gave me a vinyl copy of that I still have sealed years ago. He's like, I found a box. And he gave me a sealed copy of that record that I still haven't opened and listened to. But it's a great story.
That's a record store day record if I've ever seen one up there.
Yeah, they could do it. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, with the stuff for Vinegar Syndrome, you know, to kind of piggyback off what everybody was saying is the cool thing that I just have all the freedom, you know, just because, you know, they put their trust in me, and I really don't. Every once in a while, I'll have like a crazy idea, and I'll basically ask not so much for permission, but what do you think about this? You know, and it's like, I think it's cool, but I just want to make sure that my, you know, insane brain isn't thinking, you know, too far outside the box, you know, of something even smaller, like, you know, going back to Santa's Village for the Fear, you know, where they filmed the movie, and doing the interviews and revisiting kind of the area that they shot some of the film. But yeah, no, it's always fun to kind of not have restrictions, which I know Justin probably can get frustrated with, because when you have restrictions, too much is pulled back. You know, the labor of love is somewhat like the reins are pulled back a tiny bit. And you're fortunate when you work for a company, and not so much, you know, with a studio when you have that artistic freedom, and just kind of like a no holds barred type thing. And that's always pleasant to work with.
I've really found, I mean, I do want to say on the studio front that I found Paramount, that I was so surprised when I started working with them and how opposite of my expectation they have been. It's been absolutely amazing. And the titles that I've worked on, when I pitch them ideas on things, they totally get it. There's a group of people inside there right now who are us, and their enthusiasm for this stuff is just incredible. And so the only difference in the process between the two really is the fact that I can't completely go all out as I would on most of the Paramount things. But at the same time, the passion internally for these things and then latching onto the ideas is the same. The conversations are the same. I'm working on an insanely massive project right now that is, I mean, it's just the good thing about working with a studio like this is that you have all materials available to you. And so archives, I work with the archive team daily on this stuff. If I need something, I say, do we still have it? Let's see if we can find it. Like on The Last Castle, for example. That's the Robert Redford, James Gandolfini, Mark Ruffalo picture. Really great. Came out around September 11th, which is ultimately kind of what his Achilles heel. But when I was talking to the director, Rod, he mentioned there was this alternate ending that was shot of the military funeral for Redford's character. But he's like, because of September 11th, we didn't even touch it. We shot it. We didn't even touch it. And so I asked, like, I go, do we have this stuff? And initially Paramount's like, no, we don't have it. And then I'm like, this would mean so much if we could include some of this. And then they went deeper into the archives, and the archive team said, not only did we find it, but we have every take from that day. And so they sent all that stuff to me. Next thing I know, I'm assembling the alternate ending for Last Castle. I'm choosing which shot to use, how long to hold on it. It was just incredible assembling this stuff. That would have been completely lost to the sands of time had Rod, the director, not made that comment, and had the archive team not been open to me going, can we dig a little deeper? And finding that. And then marketing and legal going like, yeah, you know what? I didn't think they were going to even let me do the assembly. I thought we were just going to put a little commentary with some clips. But I was like, guys, what the hell? You know, kind of like one shot kind of a thing. And when they embraced it, I was just absolutely floored. And it was this great moment of realization for me that they are 100% on the same team we are. And if you look at the Paramount Presents line that we're doing, Mommy Dearest just came out, and we got to have fun with that. We have Hedda Lettuce, a drag queen, on there doing an amazing commentary, taking her stage show onto the disc, which she's been kind of a carrier of the flag for a long time for Mommy Dearest in theater out east. Little things like that. Bad News Bears, Jackie Earl Haley mentioned his dad had shot some Super 8 footage on the set one day. We had just got a camera, and my dad was fucking around. And then we're talking, and later I'm like, wait a minute, you mentioned that Super 8 thing. It was in passing. Does that exist? And he's like, oh, I don't think so. And then wait, maybe it is. And the next thing you know, oh, we found the reel. Next thing we know, he's like, my wife can transfer it. The next thing you know, it's in my inbox. And I'm seeing the only behind-the-scenes footage that exists from any day on the set of Bad News Bears. And it's him. It's the scene where he meets and he lights the cigar, gets on the motorcycle, and speeds off at the very beginning, right? And I'm like, there's no way this can go anywhere. Took it into Paramount, and legal looked at it, and they were just in love with it. And they got it through. They worked directly with Jackie to make it happen. So it's now on that disc. And little things like that, you catch that moment. If you're tuned in and the people you're talking to are open enough, you can find literal magic in these things. And then getting that out there, that's preserved, like you said, Brad. Once it's out there, it's there. It's going to carry on with the life of these movies.
Yeah.
And now someone can see, even though it's only about 3 minutes long, behind the scenes of Bad News Bears, which was a tremendous honor to be a part of. Sorry for rambling.
No. I mean, that's good. I mean, those are the stories. That's what we need.
I'm curious too that on the opposite end of that, do these companies, any of these companies, have any kind of policy on like things that can't make it into these featurettes? Like, for instance, if you find somebody and they just shit talk the movie the whole time or something like that, like, is there a policy like, okay, we don't include that in there, or will you just be like, yeah, we'll put it in, like, whatever?
With us, we have a little bit more freedom, but it all depends on the context. If it's something where it's a personal story that I feel that needs to be told, then yes, I will leave it in. If it's just a trash talk, but there's no validity behind it, there's no meaning behind it. There maybe if they're just being mean, maybe they're just trying to be funny, maybe that I suspect that there's not enough truth behind it, then yeah, it will be cut. But honestly, it's always a case-by-case basis. But I do want the truth to be told. I do want, someone's personal journey, even if it is negative, to be told, because I think that's important. I don't want to censor, anybody, because they have been before, or maybe they just never had the chance to tell it. So as long as it's not, shit talking, I guess would be the correct way to say it, I'm okay. With putting, that those on the disc. I mean, even with, I think it's this Savage Harbor release. Frank Stallone did not want to do that interview, and it starts off with him saying, and I think it's left in there. He goes, "What fucking movie are we talking about?" And he's like, Savage Harbor. He goes, "Oh, it's fucking movie." And it's like he didn't even want to be there. I think he did it as a favor. But like, that's funny. Some of these people don't like these movies, or they're embarrassed by them. And I always tell people, like, like you talk to an actress and she's like, "Oh my gosh, I had the worst time on that movie. The director was, kind of creepy and whatnot." And it's like, the director's no longer here, and this is your personal story, then tell it. I don't have a problem with it. As long as there was, no, like, a whole lot of, trash talk, I guess, we'll leave it. But honestly, it depends on context. Sometimes people have fun and they make fun of things. As long as it's not mean, I guess. But like I said, it's always a case by case basis.
It's the same with what I've experienced as well, where there sometimes be studio notes on things where they would prefer that someone not mention how much they got paid or something like that. There are little things that legal would have an issue with, and it's but it is a case by case thing. And in terms of Brad's point about the truth being important, I'm a big believer in that as well, and that's frankly why I don't include talking heads in my stuff. I don't bring in people to hypothesize about what may have been happening on set. There are some amazing historians out there doing incredible work, retrospectives, commentaries, and things like that. Hats off to them for preserving the history that they do. For me, with these releases, I've always felt that it was important to just bring in the people who were there. That to me is the most direct route to truth, is to make sure that there aren't a lot of people in the way of it, putting their theories on the same path or the same track as the people's experience who were actually in the room. So I'm in a clumsy way here saying that I believe that the truth is from the voices of those who were a part of it, and that's why I stick to those folks who are actually part of the productions with all of the stuff that I create.
There's has been a few. I'm not going to name who the person was, but I mean, I think I'll say the title. When we worked on Body Parts, which was a great release. There'd be personal conversations with one interviewee he's an amazing interview, but there'd be go down these paths that probably I'm like, I don't know if this really needs to be in here, and it's not. I mean, the truth is the truth, but there's some things that are not. I think about what the fellow crew people in the cast might think of what this person just said, and I'm like, I'm just going to save him from himself and take this out for right now. It's not like when we talk about it's the history of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre is notorious for being a hard shoot and grueling. We all know that. That's one thing, but when there's other stories that I want to use the word painful, but not like we don't need. The world doesn't need to necessarily hear it. I'm more concerned of like what the fellow crew or cast might necessarily think, because when some of these people, when they're being interviewed, they're not in the headset that this is now going to be watched by people they don't even know. They're just having a conversation with you. That's all they're doing, and I'll even say this: by the time it would get to me, they don't even know who I am. They don't know I'm watching this conversation that in their mind was a private conversation. So I look at it as, well, they're not. I'm just going to, for their own sake, we'll take this piece out and not talk about it. And the other thing is when I do stuff with Justin for Shout, depending on who like the parent label is, sometimes we would have to send stuff up to get approved beyond Shout, and the notes would come back, and I'm like, oh, I can already see the writing on the wall on certain pieces. I'm like, okay, yeah, they're going to want to cut this out. I already know they will, just from doing past releases with them. So again, it's not like I don't necessarily feel like I'm hiding anything. It's just, again, some of these guys think they're having a one-on-one conversation, not putting the whole thing in perspective, that there's all these other people who are going to be watching this, and their fellow crew members will also be watching. If they do, there's a potential that they will, and the cast members will too. So I take all those things in consideration, when I'm cutting these pieces together.
I've had many cases too where we'll do an interview or a commentary with someone, and then like a day or two later, I'll get an email or a text and saying, "Hey, I said this during the commentary or interview. Please don't use that." Because sometimes they're having a good time, they're talking, and then they regret saying something. But yeah, like I said, it's always a case by case basis, and I want it to be I don't know. It's really hard to say, because honestly, you have to have the scenario. Like in All American Murder, which is which is a crazy movie. But we did an interview with the DP on that movie, and he kind of explains why the movie is like it is, why it's kind of a mess. And I left it in there because I thought it was pretty interesting, of kind of the troubles that happen behind the scenes. Sometimes they'll tell you more on the phone, and they won't tell you as much during the interview. But I think it's interesting. It's not really trash talking. It's just like, hey, this person really didn't know what they were doing. So I helped out as much as I could, and this is what we ended up with. There was trouble behind the production. I think those are interesting stories. It's not so much reflecting on the person that is responsible, but just kind of reflecting on the production itself.
I was curious, though, about some of these titles you guys go after. They're obscure movies, a lot of them are. Is there any that you can remember that the source material, you just couldn't find it and you had to give up?
I will not say we've never given up. It just goes on hold. I'm very persistent. Sometimes we do have confirmation on movies where unfortunately the filmmaker says, oh yeah, the negatives were in big canisters and taking up room in my garage, so I threw them out like 10 years ago. Because no one was thinking, especially them, thinking that anything is going to be on DVD or Blu-ray or there's going to be a restoration. So there's that. But sometimes, was there a print struck from the negative? Is the inner positive intact? Did they, do have a work print or something that was actually filmed? Did they have, I can't think of the name of it. The assembly cut, something like that. Is there any film material? Mm-hmm. So yes and no. We wouldn't give up. We just kind of put it on hold and then keep our ears to the ground to see if something does pop up, because that does happen. I know Severin was just doing that with Raiders of Atlantis, because Raiders of Atlantis is when I was investigating for that stuff, there was no known prints for that movie. And then I did find a print, but Severin obviously found the negative to that film. So like there's all these types of stories and kind of myths that people talk and said, oh, this is destroyed, this is gone. But it's honestly, you just be persistent and not give up. But yeah, no, there's a lot of heartbreaking stories about stuff that's just gone. Filmmakers losing stuff in a flood, in a fire, threw stuff out. Especially if it's a smaller film that didn't have a theatrical run, so they know, no prints were struck, and they only had the film material, and then they had a fire in their garage, and it's gone. And chances are, yeah, that movie's not going to get a re-release, or not that it's not going to get a re-release, it's just not going to be restored. They could still re-release it with a VHS quality on the DVD or Blu-ray, and that's like the last resort.
Man, something I was always curious about too, like you always hear these stories about, they find the the 16 millimeter, the 35 millimeter in this abandoned warehouse or something like that no one ever knew existed. Have you guys ever had an experience like that where they found a print of this film, like, or you found it, or somebody that you were working with found it, or anything like that?
Oh yeah. No, movies are found in the weirdest places all the time. Yeah, it's the stuff is found. We just had this kind of incident with Surf 2. Is when I called Randall, to be part of this release, we're talking. And he's just not very enthused about doing it. And we kind of like, he's going to do it, but I can tell that he's being a little apprehensive. And so that's when I was like, I don't want to force you to do this, because that's the last thing I want to do. I want you to be energetic. I want you to I want you to be at least somewhat excited, because then if you don't, then the commentary is going to be pretty lackluster. Your interview is going to be shitty. You know, I want to get to the bottom of it. I don't want to force anybody to do anything. That's when Randall said, he's like, well, I would much prefer if you had this director's cut, that I did before they reshot, some of the movie and reassembled the edit. And I said, I had no idea about this. So we were on the hunt for this, and he said there is a print struck for it. So there's one print that was in existence. Other than that, he had a tape of his cut that he had personally. And I said, well, if we can't find, this print, then we'll put the tape, we'll transfer the tape, and at least that will be somewhat, it'll look like shit, but, at least it will be out there. So we hunted for this director's cut, and we found it, in a collection. And that was the coolest part. And when I called Randall to tell him that, everything changed. Then he was like really happy, and we did a comment because he did a commentary for the theatrical cut, and then he did a commentary for the director's cut. It was a lot of fun because I got to watch this cut for the first time after it was scanned, and I was very familiar with the original cut, so I offered to become one because I listened to the commentary that he did already. And so I volunteered, to do the moderate the commentary for the director's cut because, it was kind of cool to kind of think that I actually had both of them playing at the same time while I was doing the commentary, so I would know when things would pop up and changes were made. Just talking about that, I thought that was a lot of fun. And I forget where the question originated. I'm sorry, I was rambling so much.
It's okay.
I forget
how to find prints when people can't find them.
Oh, finding prints, yeah. No, prints are found. I mean, David Gregory was just in, I think he's in the UK, and he found a bunch of film cans in a barn. They're found everywhere. Because film cans are huge. They weigh a ton, film prints. And if you're a producer or a filmmaker that has made a lot of films, you have a palette of film that you probably have. And where do you put that? You put it anywhere but your home,
For a while there, from like the 40s to the 80s, there used to be film depots in a lot of markets. I know for like Iowa's film market, there was a film depot here in Des Moines that fed prints. All the studios had these little depots. So Paramount would be there, Fox would be there, MGM would be there. And the theater owners could go down there and make deals, to screen the film. They would pick up the prints, pick up their posters, and go to their movie theater. The late 80s, the Film Depot here in Des Moines closed. And rumor has it that the studios didn't want their prints anymore. And people were either buying them, collecting them. There's a theater chain here in Iowa called Fridley Theaters. They've been around since before World War II. Their office is downtown. And that guy, for every film that came out into one of his theaters, he kept a print. And they're all in the basement of this office building downtown. And what he has is insane, what's down there. I mean, I can't even like look through it all, but they have their own private screening room with 35 and all these prints from like, I think dating back to the 50s until like 86. I don't know what's in there. I know there's probably some gold, probably things that anyone who's listening or watching might be interested in. But
I'm interested. I'll probably email you because that could be a source,
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, it was that guy I told you about, Bob Fridley, who produced that movie Hazing, who I think I sent you an email about a while back. But yeah, that guy has all this stuff just sitting down there. And he just died at age 104. He still went into the office until 98. And but his sons run it.
Wow.
And they're still running movie theaters, and these prints, they even said they don't know what to do with them because Gone with the Wind is down there. So yeah, I don't want to get anyone too excited, but yeah, that and it's not just
you never know. I mean, Some of our Blu-rays are sourced from prints because we're unable to find, the original negative or the IP or IN. So yeah, I mean, we've restored, to an extent. You can only restore, basically just clean it up. But we have some films where there are just prints that the remaining prints, and sometimes you have to Frankenstein these projects together because you'll have like 3 prints and some are fucked up in certain areas and you just have to reassemble everything, and everything can be quite a nightmare.
But I look at Iowa's not that unique. You look at even you guys in Kentucky. I'm sure there was a Film Depot in Louisville or somewhere that all the theaters would go and get their prints from at some point. So I have a hunch that all those prints went somewhere when they closed those depots down. This is before Technicolor existed in Deluxe, where now, that's where all the major theaters get their DCPs, and they used to get their 35 millimeter prints from. They get them from Technicolor or Deluxe. I think might be a couple others out there, but before that was these Film Depots that each of these studios set up, and they have in every state. And if you had multiple major cities, they would. They would distribute them. I see Felcher just chimed in.
Yeah, he's jealous. We usually just have Felcher on, so some of these people owe me money. He owes me a Blu-ray. Actually, I wonder if he mailed it out. Felcher. We've got a few people that's asking about certain movies. I guess for Brad, do you mind if we go through some of them? If you guys have looked into
honestly,
it,
I'm not going to answer any questions pertaining to rights. All I can say is that I haven't really looked at the comment section, but I'm not going to really answer questions. I will, if you say this needs to have a Blu-ray, I probably agree with you. But
well, there's a couple that people always ask about. Trick or Treat 86. What is it, a music issue with that, or what is the deal?
There's a few issues. There you go. Falling in a side.
All right.
You're not gonna get too much. You're not gonna get too much from me.
Very De Niro.
Man, you're worse than Felcher. You're worse than
few
Felcher.
issues.
Satan's Little Helper. I don't even think that's shot on film, so that would not be from us.
There's some like media home entertainment stuff from back in the day. Home Sweet Home, Terror on Tour. I mean, that'd be right up Vinegar Syndrome alley, but I mean, it may be hard to track down, I'm guessing, right?
I always say, in a way that there's so much on our radar and so much on our want list. It's insane, and every film has a different journey. Some are easier, some take years. So anyways, yeah.
One for Justin, he might know about since he's working with Paramount. The Keep. Will that thing ever come out?
I haven't heard anything about it, any kind of movement on it. I'm not sure what's holding it up. I mean, Michael might know more to that. Maybe I don't know if you've run into that over time, Michael, but yeah, I'm not familiar with any of the status on that one.
Okay. Summer Camp Nightmare, Blood Beach. I think those are all the ones that I wrote down.
Who's going to release
Summer Camp Nightmare gets requested quite a bit. Yeah.
I've got a personal request for a VSA. Prayer of the Roller Boys. That would be perfect.
I completely agree with you.
There should be a Rollerblade box set. If a Bill Rebane box set can come out. By the way, without Capture a Bigfoot, which was incredibly disappointing that Capture a Bigfoot wasn't on there because I love that movie. But if a Bill Rebane
there's a few films, that weren't included on that. But yeah, there's 7 Rollerblade movies.
Love them. Think. The first one, holy cow. That was what a bizarre slice of weird that thing is. I absolutely love it.
Gleam
Yeah.
EQ, did it get like a new DVD release or something like that not too long ago? Like overseas? I'm thinking.
Yeah, it's a
Or is that a
bootleg.
bootleg? Oh, okay. How about that reminded me. I don't think I have it here. Clown House. Will anybody touch that movie?
Jesus.
With the history of that, I don't think so. Personally, I wouldn't want to work on it.
Well, Scream Factory, I think they came close, right? A few years ago.
I mean, honestly, the movie's owned by MGM, and I don't think MGM would allow it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't blame them. Fortress. That's one that I like quite a bit. The Rachel Ward HBO movie from back in the day.
You just said the key word, HBO.
Yeah. Same thing for The Hitcher, I guess, right? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, just some things, man. It's just like, you know, when you deal with TV movies, you have TV studios that own stuff. You know, there's so many different scenarios because there's so many different exchange and with rights with people. You know, you have to determine, did they sell the movie? Did they just license it? You know, on top of that, you know, the big portion of this too is that, you know, sometimes you find the rights, but you just don't have the material, or you find the material, but you just can't, you know, because at times, you know, and we do it still to this day. There's a lot of handshake deals. You know, there's a lot of just like, hey, can you do this for me? Yeah, sure. And then, you know, people move on and they die, and then you just don't know what happened. There's so many different scenarios, so it's just being careful and trying to, you know, make sure that you're absolutely 100% correct in what you're doing. And like I said, it's two journeys. One is finding the film elements and if they're in good condition, and two, finding the rights, because sometimes those two aren't in the same place. When they are, that's a beautiful thing, and it makes things a lot easier. When they're not, then you might be in for a long haul. So
There was one more that I just thought of. You guys did the Beastmaster set. It's a killer set, by the way.
thank you.
Are you going to be working more with Coscarelli on some other movies? I know he posted it looked like a remastered Kenny and Company picture not too long ago.
Not that I know of now. And honestly,
Okay.
if we were, I wouldn't tell you anyway.
I know how it is.
Yeah, no, I mean, Don was. We only worked with Don on Beastmaster, and Don is such a wonderful person to work with, and on top of that, kind of one of the unsung heroes for Beastmaster is Paul Pepperman. You know, Coscarelli's right hand man, which is, you know, working with Paul and Don on that release was just so amazing, because one, they were also very involved with the process, which is always great. You know, it slows, sometimes those things slow things down, but it slows things down for the right reasons. And you know, Don's involvement and Paul's involvement, then once they were involved, everything kind of came around. Everybody, you know, got together, and it was just I was very thankful to work with him. And honestly, after we were done with kind of the production of things, I got an email from Don personally, just, you know, thanking me for everything. And it was just really nice to hear, get an email from, you know, I consider him a hero, because I still think Phantasm's one of the best movies ever made. And, you know, that's a film that really got me into movies and want to become a filmmaker. There's a few, you know, core films like that for me, and Phantasm is one of them. And to get a note from your hero saying thank you, that means a lot. And we do. I imagine Justin gets that too. It's a great feeling when you have something like that you cherish and you love and you respect. That you kind of get the same thing in return. that it's reciprocated to back and forth, and that makes these projects really, really well worth it and really memorable, and almost sad that they end, because some people you work with once and you're done. Just that happened with Lance Munguia. We had a conversation last night. I called him to make sure he got his discs and everything, and it was weird because we were like saying goodbye on the phone in a way. Like, we're still going to try to keep in touch, but we're done. I have to move on to other projects. So at this point, you're done with this project. You're moving on, and it felt weird because it was kind of like I said, saying goodbye. So
cool. I would love to see you. Well, go ahead. Sorry. Yeah, Phil. We do.
Phil with the fucking
we like
comments.
The scoops, but he's still pissed that we got the Monster Squad scoop back in the day for the DVD. Right.
I remember that. When I originally, way back when, I mentioned in that email I sent to you, Wes, is that DEADPIT used to be the source for a lot of these interviews. It was even before podcasts were really a thing. And so before a lot of this content was available, DEADPIT had it. I often reference the Don Edmonds interview that you guys had, because Don Edmonds died within like a year, I think, after you guys did that interview.
Well, earlier when you were talking about we don't have much time to do these, I was thinking about, like, we did a interview with Lou Perryman, and it couldn't have been, this was before the Texas Chainsaw 2 and all that came out. It couldn't have been a month, maybe 2 months after that he was killed. And I mean, it's just one of those freak crazy things, but man, like, it was amazing to get to do that. And I don't think many people had gotten, or maybe even cared to get an interview with him about anything like that prior to that. So that was amazing.
There's just a lot of people over the years. Bob Clark was another one that I always think about. That was probably 3 or 4 months after we interviewed him. He had that car wreck and passed away.
Yeah. So yeah.
It says, thank you, the guys at BS, for releasing John Hart's masterpiece, Get Even.
Amazing.
Yeah. I'm a huge Get Even fan, and a very big John DeHart fan. And that was one of the most interesting projects I ever worked on. That's all I'll say. I'm just happy that we're able, and that's another thing, is that, talking with John, contacting him about, I said, hey, we have, I would like to release Get Even, Road to Revenge. And then he was like, oh, well, I don't have any film material for that. And I was like, well, that's a bummer. He's like, well, that's because, I have, it's 2 other cuts for my original movie, Champagne and Bullets. And I was like, you say you have one movie with 3 different cuts. And he's like, yeah. And I was like, let's do it, and, because people are familiar with Get Even and Road to Revenge, but Champagne and Bullets hasn't been seen. That was the the incredible part. And, he still had film material for that. And we were able to release Champagne and Bullets in its glory. And I'm a big fan of that movie, and I'm really glad people are digging it. It's quite the ride.
Brad, something that was announced in the last 48 hours by both Vinegar Syndrome and Severin, 2 Paul Morrissey films. And I have to say, I lost my shit when I saw that, because I'm such a huge Paul Morrissey fan for the Andy Warhol films, that the Flesh for Frankenstein and the Dracula film. That's a huge win for both companies.
Yeah, we're very excited about that, and people will not be disappointed from either company.
I'm really hoping more Paul Morrissey stuff comes out here real soon, like the Trash and Heat, Flesh, the real, what I would call pre-John Waters trash films that was coming out of the Andy Warhol factory. and I never thought I would see the day for a Blu-ray. You would think, just because it's the Andy Warhol connection. But that's absolutely amazing that both companies are doing that. I mean, the relationship between the companies is also really fascinating, especially between Severin, Vinegar Syndrome, and then all the partner labels that Vinegar Syndrome has as well. It's not even like competing companies. It's like everyone's on the mission, to preserve and get these things out there. I think right now is with Something Weird kind of taking all their titles and distributing it to all these other labels too. There's a new opportunity for even more rare films to come out, like really hard to find. I mean, I still have Something Weird VHS tapes, like some of the STD scare films, like USS VD Ship of Shame, things like that.
No, absolutely. Yeah, I have some of that too. Yeah, it's that's the one thing, is that it's always said is like there's this competition, which, I mean, not every label is buddy. But yeah, with Severin, they're very much good friends of ours. So we have a great relationship. I mean, yeah. I just did, which was announced today, I did the moderated commentary, actor Tony King, on the Raiders of Atlantis release, for Severin, just because, fantastic company, and they knew my love for that movie, and how I still think that's one of the greatest movies ever made. So it was, it was an honor to go on and do that. But yeah, there's great relationship between all, a lot of these companies. And yeah, the partner label thing is one thing, but like AGFA, Arrow, Severin is a very great relationship, and a lot of respect. So what is the thing you tagged? King Kong 76 from Shout Factory. Oh, Alley Cat, yeah. And Brotherhood of the Wolf, finally a decent release of Brotherhood of the Wolf instead of that shoddy Blu-ray that came out in the UK. Absolutely.
It's definitely a fun time for if you're a collector, a film fan, or whatever, because there's so much of this stuff, honestly, that I've never fucking heard of. So I get to see it for the first time. And I mean, you guys are all doing a great job. I'm glad that we got to do this, and we could really have separate shows for all you guys. I mean, it just seems like so much more. Just your list of stuff that you've worked on just for Scream Factory could be a show. I mean, it's ridiculous. Justin
could be a show, just his own personal story.
Yeah. I mean, that's what I'm saying. There's just so much to talk about with you guys. But Uncle Bill, do you have anything else? It's almost bedtime, I'm sure, for some of these guys.
It's almost bedtime, yeah. Let me put it this way. Is there anything moving forward that people may not know about that you can give any input on, or would be willing to give any input on?
Like the Nightmare on Elm Street box set. I know it's coming. Slippy won't say shit.
All right.
He won't tell us, but I can tell by the look in his eye.
You know it's coming. But anyway, besides that, which we already know, doesn't exist.
Well, we have a lot of movies coming out at Vinegar Syndrome. A lot. And, yeah.
I have one project I finished with Synapse last year. It's a box set. And I think probably around the same time I mailed that Satan's Almighty Penis CD. We always keep coming back to that. I sent some screeners. I know, right? Of films by a guy named Blake Eckert to you guys. One was Bubba Moonface, and I don't think you guys finished it. But there's a filmmaker from Stanberry,
Bubba Moonface, baby.
That's it.
That would have been a good one for Dusty Rose to have been back in the
day.
Line in the sand, Bubba.
Blake Eckert, he lives in this town in Stanberry, Missouri, and he's been making films there for over 25 years. 2 of them were shot on 16, and he's had this small town of 1,000 has been his backdrop studio since he was 18. And Synapse is releasing 6 of his movies in a box set on a Blu-ray set. And I had produced and directed a documentary for them. It premiered at St. Louis called Somewhere Between New York and L.A. And Blake's had this unfortunate career where he was always like 10 years too late. Like he was making mumblecore movies in 2006 when it died in 1996. You know what I mean? Sort of that early 90s Kevin Smith, not comedies, they were all dramas, small town dramas. 16 black and white 16 millimeter films, and they're now finally coming out. I worked on the restoration of those. I found prints that he didn't know existed, found his negative, which was in a shed, that he just kind of was like, yeah, I don't know, it might be in there. And I went down there for a weekend to stay at his house, and I went through all of his materials to send, and there it was. And we sent the stuff to Chicago, got everything scanned, and it's kind of a huge thing. And Don May's been a huge part of Don May and Jerry have been a huge part of that finally coming to light, because I didn't know if he would ever get his due, because I'm a huge fan of him. If you ever watched any of the films of Eagle Pennell from Texas, he started around the same time as Tobe Hooper. In fact, Lou Perryman was in The Whole Shooting Match, which Eagle Pennell directed, part of that early Texas indie thing. And his films are very similar. Blake's films are very similar to Eagle Pennell's. So that is my scoop that no one cares about except for me.
Well, we are actually talking to Don on Friday. We'll have another live stream.
Tell him that he needs to get that box set on Blake Eckert out. He's had the materials for a long time.
He takes his time, Don May does.
Yes, he does.
He's working on the credits for the Kindred, and it may be done in the next couple of years. And get it out.
Yes. Well, when the thing started, he was still in restoring Suspiria when this whole thing with Blake started. So if that tells you how long, So.
Well, he worked on Suspiria for about 15 years, didn't he, or something?
Yeah, something like that. Yeah.
I'm glad he did. That's an amazing.
It was worth it. It was absolutely worth it.
I was going to say that's an amazing disc.
Yeah, I mean, totally. I really shouldn't bitch about anything, But yes.
No, I mean that's the thing. If you know that Synapse released it, it's going to look better than it looked the day it came out.
Absolutely.
So, guys, but yeah, I mean, we appreciate you joining us on here and staying for almost 2 hours. It was fun, and hopefully we can do it again soon. Like I said, maybe get Justin on separately to talk about all 97 Scream Factory releases. A lot of stuff. I mean, Sleepy must hate you, man. Like you took all of his gigs from Scream Factory.
It's weird. What is that one?
Oh, I'm just if people don't know, I'm just putting them up here.
all Vinegar Syndrome titles, or
yeah,
you need to put Vinegar boxes up there.
I just finished Televised Terror, all 3 movies today.
They messed up his order.
Yeah,
my Vinegar Syndrome stuff shipped today too, you guys.
I'm forever grateful to Vinegar for putting Bloodhook out. So I just want to throw a big kudos out there. Bloodhook landing on Blu-ray, an extended cut. After that day, I knew I could die a happy man. So once that happened, I was done searching for things, for anything, because you guys made my life. So thank you for that.
The only thing is Madman needs a fucking slipcover, okay? I'm sick of waiting. So you need to put that in. Tell them.
I'll put it in the comments, or
we've waited long enough. Can I send that in as a suggestion?
Listen, computer.
No, I mean I'm listening to you. I will say that my main focus is new movies.
Brad, the computer says you're a dead fuck.
What is that?
The computer says you're a dead fuck. I just entered his request. There is no computer.
If not that dude, Madman 4K. I'll be fine with that.
I mean,
Wrote it
There
down.
you go.
You know, Brad, he has a point. If Sex World can have a 4K UHD release in a slipcase and a poster, Madman can have a slipcase.
We're gonna re-release every single movie you've ever done in 4K UHD tomorrow. They're all coming out.
by the way, just as a
Sounds
side
good.
note, you know you've really made it as a company when the fucking slip covers are selling on eBay for like $40 or $50. I'm like, Jesus Christ. Please.
Yeah, I mean, it's cool. I mean, the slipcovers are really nice. Yeah, people really like them, and I hope they get what they want.
I blame
Yeah.
I blame
my-
Scream Factory for that. They were the ones that made them limited, right? They were the first ones to do the first 2 months or something like that.
Yeah,
And
I
then
mean,
they went out of
I don't
print,
really
people-
know about the limited thing. I mean, it's just like, you know, you can't keep. There's so much that goes into it because of between the damaging of them, and it's just honestly, it is, you know, kind of an extra step for that stuff. I mean, I'm glad people like them. I've never been a slipcover person myself. I really don't care. But yeah, I mean, there's just so many extra steps for that with the care and the packaging, and like I said, it's just another cost thing as well, because you know, if they're done nicely, which I think ours are pretty nice. You know, it is that extra cost, you know. But yeah, it's anyways.
All right.
Thank you
well,
guys for having us on. We really appreciate it very much.
Yeah.
We
Yeah,
love. I mean,
thank
we
you,
love
guys.
talking about this sort of thing and just listening to you guys. So, yeah, I mean, we're anxiously anticipating what the big fall titles are and everything. Everybody's kind of hyping it up online. Of course, they will not say shit, but we'll eventually find out, I guess, in the next couple of weeks, maybe.
Yeah, I mean, we do announcements every month. You know, so that's something that is always people can look forward to, is that once the previous month starts shipping, you know, I think it's like on the 28th or something like that. I don't recall the date, but it's towards the end of the month. We always announce our next month. So we find a lot of enjoyment out of that to keep, you know, speculations. We drop hints. You know, Joe drops, you know, a couple hints on, you know, the newsletters. You know, we say like a monster movie is coming, or, you know, a regional horror film, a new giallo, something like that. So just kind of keeps people talking, and it's, you know, it's almost like a gift, because you know, we like announcing things. We like keeping things a secret, because, you know, it's something to look forward to, you know, and plus it's cool when we do that too. You know, it's fun for me to, you know, keep things under wraps and then unleash it, you know, without actually, you know, not having a leak or something, which things do happen. But yeah, it's fun to surprise the audience. It's fun to see guesses. You know, it's fun to see people struggle to get words out of somebody on a, you know, a podcast or a live show. But yeah.
I have to say goodbye, you guys. Thank you so much for having me on tonight.
Thanks, man.
Thanks, Justin.
Thank you,
Justin.
guys. But yeah, I mean, we'll let you guys go. We appreciate you all taking the time out.
No,
to do
thanks
this
for having
sort
us
of
on.
thing.
I
Yeah.
greatly appreciate
It
it.
was a lot of fun, guys.
And I know back when Vinegar Syndrome first started, we almost had Ryan Emerson on, and I've thought about that because that was when they were doing like the porn stuff, I think, primarily, right, when they first started out. And they just
I mean,
blew up, man.
there
I mean,
was-
it's ridiculous.
I mean, yeah. I mean, the first little bit. I mean, but yeah, we had a lot of exploitation films when we first started, like with stuff like Rescuing, like The Suckers and stuff like that. So yeah, no, there's plenty of genre stuff aside from the porn. But yeah, I mean, I'm sure, you know, talking to Ryan, he would I mean, Ryan's like, he's a colorist, he's a restoration artist. He can talk about stuff that that I can't, because I don't do. I mainly do acquisitions and special features. I don't do. I mean, I know how the restoration process kind of works, but I can't talk about it because that would be silly. Ryan's a genius and a wonderful person and a great boss, and yeah, he'd be great to have on to talk about that.
Yeah, for sure. Hopefully we can. I know we almost had it scheduled, but it was weird times back then. I can't remember a lot. I don't know what all was going on. But anyway, you guys have a good night, and we appreciate it. Kristian, again, I appreciate you setting this up for us, and hopefully we can individually get you guys back on and talk about some more stuff in the near future.
Right on, guys.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Cool.
I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Thanks, guys.
All right. Take it easy. Good night,
All
everybody.
right.
Good night.
You all have a good night.
Bye. You too.
Thank you to all of our supporters on Patreon. DEADPIT on Patreon.com is the only place to check out a complete archive of the old DEADPIT radio shows all the way back from 2005 on, in addition to the midweek shows and fan commentaries, exclusive podcasts, and much more. DEADPIT on Patreon.com if you're interested. Tiers start at only $1.